How many young men and women lost their dream when they refused to take the COVID-19 vaccination and they were kicked out of the military for doing so? This week, join me and Sam Shoemate as we explore the unlawful order from the Pentagon. This is the David Rutherford Show. Nothing infuriates me more than when a country doesn't take care of the men who are willing to defend it. What makes me even more angry is when the people that are in charge of those men aren't willing to defend their men. Today, we're going to dive into something that is so profoundly atrocious in so many different ways that I'm really struggling to find the words to describe it. And that's why I brought Sam on today. So Sam, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me here.
So about 6 days ago, you released a video which recognized that senior members within the Defense Department knew that the orders they gave to vaccinate their personnel were unlawful. And you referenced another video that you had done on January 1st, 2024. Can you give the audience a little brief back on what you're talking about and what the impact of this forced vaccination has done?
Sure. And I tell people I could give this talk in 5 minutes, or it could take me a whole hour. So I will try to be as brief with this so we can actually discuss it. But basically what happened was the vaccine came out in 2021. It was an EUA vaccine. It was Pfizer's BioNTech. And in August of 2021, specifically August 23rd, the FDA came out and approved Pfizer's Comirnaty for FDA approval. So the following day, on August 24th, the Secretary of Defense, Austin, he put out the mandate that service members had to be vaccinated with the FDA-approved vaccine. So this would be Pfizer's Comirnaty, which was allegedly the only thing available. The next month, people started to notice that there was no FDA-approved vaccine. It had not been produced. It had not only not been produced, but obviously it had not been sent out to the force. So there were no stocks across any installations. And with that, they had to do something to make this somehow legal. I use that term legal loosely, but
Right.
Basically what came out from that was they made a memo that was signed by the acting Undersecretary of Defense for the Defense Health Agency, Terry Aderum, and she signed a memo that stated that the EUA and FDA vaccines could be used interchangeably for the purposes of fulfilling the COVID vaccine 19 mandate. All right. Couple of things here. Legally, that's not possible. You cannot make a vaccine interchangeable. What Pfizer had done, and they made this very clear, was they said this can be used interchangeably for the purpose of the vaccine, the 2-dose vaccine, because they are the similar ingredients. However, they are still legally distinct. Pfizer made it very clear that they were legally distinct because they weren't going to jump into that fray. They had no interest in getting into the DoD's business in that regard. So commanders were mandating the service members take this vaccine based on that memo. And we have this from commanding generals and everybody else who used that memo as their launching off point to mandate that service members get this. Well, if you back up a little bit, there's two things here. First of all, once again, Secretary of Defense's memo, the mandate itself stated that the vaccine would be mandated based on the FDA-approved vaccine, which didn't exist. So his memo was technically lawful. And this is where the shell game and the
sleight of hand.
The sleight of hand took off. Okay.
Right.
So while his memo was legal and the rest of the public saw that as legal because that was the legal wording, there was nothing to fulfill that with legally because the vaccine was not available. So they had to make that memorandum underneath. However, we also found out, and this is proven not only in court, but just open source documents that anybody can see that we've put out, many other people have put out. But on August 23rd, when that BLA licensing was approved for that Comirnaty vaccine, it was withdrawn the same day. It was approved and withdrawn. So not only, even if the vaccine did exist, even if it had been produced, it still wouldn't be legal because the BLA licensing was issued and then withdrawn on the same exact day. The whole thing was fouled up, and the BLA licensing was not reinstated until December of 2021. However, there was still not a vaccine that was produced. So they were kicking service members out who were lawfully refusing to take an EUA vaccine, and this continued on for years until they removed the mandate. That's basically it in a nutshell.
And what roughly the number that I got from going on Grok was 8,200 service members. Is that correct?
They say about 8,700. The number that gets thrown around the most is 8,700. However, it's important to note that those 8,700 were the ones that were actually kicked out who were in the middle of their contracts. There were tens of thousands more, and some people speculate up to 100,000 who either resigned their commissions, refused to re-up, or whatever the case is, specifically because of this mandate and what was done, because they knew that what was being ordered was unlawful, illegal, and they didn't want any part of being a part of an organization that was willing to do that. So
it blows my mind. I mean, for me, I remember there was a case that a lawyer in Arizona was representing some SEALs. And that's what obviously caught my attention. And right from the get-go, I was like, this is insane that DoD is forcing people. Now, I got to take a step back. And I don't know if you had to go through this too, but, way back when, my day at the beginning, it was anthrax, right? You will get your anthrax dosages. And I think, I don't even know, I might have 3 sequences, and I don't even know how many guys I jabbed, right? Sure. And it was, I was like, wait, man, is there a way we can know the long-term effects of putting anthrax? Shut up and take it, right? And
yep.
And I did it like a dutiful, little sailor does. But this, I mean, this experimental, whatever it is such an abomination to force men to do it. In particular, young, healthy men and women that maybe even, and the crazy one was people that had already gotten it and had their own immunity built up from it. And they still force these people. And that's what caught my eye. Do you know if any of the lawsuits that have been brought forward, I know the president came in and said, hey, everybody, anybody that got screwed over by this, absolutely, we want you to come back in, finish thing, we're back pay, the whole deal. And apparently there's like only 113 people, I guess, who have done that or something.
That's more than I was aware of.
Yeah, I just found that. It took me a little while to find that number, but it was like 113 had come back from separated service. Is there any of those lawsuits that you've seen that have been willing to fight and get some type of compensation or anything for that?
So I know that there are still lawsuits in place, and they came out after the mandate was repealed, because what happened was they pulled a nice little trick. In 2022, they repealed the mandate through the NDAA. So this was when Republicans were running for the House and the Senate, and they were trying to, this is one of the big things they were stumping on because they knew this was a huge issue with their constituency. So they promised that they would, if they got elected, they were going to repeal the mandate and all this stuff. And they did. It came out in the NDAA. The mandate was repealed. With that, judges ruled that all of the lawsuits that were currently in the pipeline were moot. They squashed all of the lawsuits, which had nothing to do with the repeal of the mandate, because the law was broken. Service members' constitutional rights were trampled on. The law was broken. And those lawsuits should have stayed in effect, but judges summarily ruled that they were all moot because the mandate was no longer in effect. Therefore, there's no need for a lawsuit. So people had to start all over again with this. And I know there's a couple now. I don't know where they're at or what's going on with them, but they are still fighting to get this legally ruled on. And the DoD coming out now and stating that it's unlawful is a huge win. I don't honestly know what that's going to mean for people that are fighting, but it was ruled. And I do know that there are 2 individuals, only 2 out of all of the people that have been injured, hurt, killed from this vaccine, this experimental vaccine that did not have the proper testing. And I'm gonna let anybody who's listening to this know that if you believe that this was tested properly and you have not looked into the Pfizer documents, you're just stupid, just pure and simple.
Well, Dr. Naomi Wolf, I mean, she exposed that with what she had she got an army of like 3,200 lawyers. They dug into that, right? The 70, what is it? I don't even know how many, 75,000 pages of documents have proven categorically there was no legal testing. We've heard Robert Kennedy Jr., the whole gambit of this thing is just an abomination of constitutional rights. It's crazy to me.
It is.
Has anybody individually reached out to you and told you their story that you could share with us?
Oh yeah, hundreds. That was the thing running terminal CWOs, because for years I was at the forefront of this fight where I was not only putting out information and fighting back against this, but I was taking service member stories. And to finish that thought, there are 2 service members who were ruled by the Department of the Army that the vaccine caused their injuries. Carolina Stansick is one of those individuals, and she's now, I believe she's 25 now, but by the age of 23, she had 3 heart attacks and a stroke, and she has a pacemaker now. This was otherwise a healthy individual who was vaccinated when she was in AIT, and now she's crippled for life. She's getting a service dog because she has moments where she just passes out, and she has to have an animal there to help her in case of that. But her life has been altered for forever. And I know hundreds of other stories. Some of them are so, I don't know. I'm trying to recall off the top of my head. There was one that really bothered me. It was a warrant officer, and this was in, I believe, December. It was either November or December of 2022, but he was going to the 180 Alpha course for Special Forces warrant officer. Mm-hmm. And I had talked to his teammates. I had spoken to everybody at the course, and this guy was an absolute PT stud, just an absolute monster out there doing a simple 2-mile run and just dropped dead. And this happened so many times over the course of things. In fact, I put this out on Twitter about a year ago, but there was an individual, how secretive CAG is and how closed off that environment is. But there was a major that his teammates told me basically that he was considered the top guy in the unit for PT. Like, he was the guy. He was just an absolute PT monster. I believe he was 37 or 38, according to his obituary. If you look at his obituary, obviously there's no reference to the unit or anything like that. But I had spoken to a couple of his teammates who told me his story, and same thing. He just dropped dead of heart failure when he was out doing PT. And prior to that, to be called at the top of the game in the unit of all units, tier 1 Delta Force, as a PT stud is like basically calling somebody an Olympic athlete. And we have story after story of individuals like this who were in the peak and prime of their life, who were just absolute PT monsters whose bodies failed them because of what was done. And to call this a betrayal or treason or anything, those words just don't seem strong enough. We overuse those all the time, but our leadership failed to read the law. They failed to take care of their troops, and they betrayed them knowingly. And many of them went out of their ways to destroy their lives if they refused to take the vaccine. I mean, went out of their way to make sure that they were hurt financially, and do everything they possibly could to maim them going forward so that they would feel the effects of not obeying this order. And that, to me, is almost even worse. So
I think betrayal is absolutely the worst possible thing that, other than death itself, that a human being can feel, right? In particular, a betrayal where the allegiance is built upon the existential commitment of willing to put your life on the line for something bigger than yourself. And that's what this is. Now, for those of you who are listening, there's data that supports these injuries, right? Just like the VAERS database with its astronomical levels and guaranteed that we're beginning to find out that data has been manipulated as well too. But with the DMED database, right, the Defense Medical Database, apparently there were an 1,100% increase in just neurological events alone. And then there's a former Green Beret colonel who's out there who's saying that they actually went back and manipulated the database for a few years before,
Dr.
raised
Pete
the level. Yeah. Would you describe a little bit of that, please?
So I worked for Pete. Pete,
Wow.
First of all, I will tell you, is one of the best human beings I've ever met in my life, and he's a legend. 39 years in the Army. I can't even give you his full resume because some of it's off the books, but just all the cool guy stuff you can imagine. And he was one of 3 whistleblowers, him, Major Sam Sigaloff, and Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Teresa Long, who came out and exposed what was going on in the medical database. But like you said, there were numbers up into the 1,100 percentiles. And I've said this on a couple of shows, but I want to make this very clear. There are some things that are outside the scope of the law, outside the scope of playing by the rules or anything else that I have discovered in my lifetime. There are 2 things. One, Epstein. They went into his jailhouse. They turned off the cameras. They told the guards to stick their fingers in their ears and turn the other way, and they killed the dude. And then they said he killed himself. They didn't play by the rules. They didn't even try to make it look like an accident. They just went in there, murdered him, and walked out. The second one is what they did to the DMED database. After this stuff was exposed, and I'm telling you, this is one of the most sound and fail-proof databases that's ever been created. And before I explain this, I want to tell you why. VAERS is something that's input by everybody. There is, you have an injury, you have something that's done to you, you can go into VAERS as a just a normal citizen and input your whatever. But with DMED, it's only the medical provider. So your PAs, your medics, your doctors, they are the only people that can input that stuff. So if you go in for a broken arm and you get seen 2 times for a broken arm, it will show up in DMED as 2 visits. It's not that there were that many incidents. It means that there were 2 visits that you personally had for that broken arm. So we saw these numbers of myocarditis, abortion, and not people taking willing abortions. I'm talking about losing their child unwillingly. Pericarditis, turbo cancers, Guillain-Barré syndrome, all of this crazy stuff that skyrocketed because people were being seen all over the place for what was taking place. When this stuff was exposed, it was so catastrophic that they went in there over the weekend, took the database down. They had their media outlets publish stories immediately saying, we had an error in the database. The last 5 years of information is incorrect. We had to take it down, fix the data, and they brought it back up within semi-normal levels. They were still high, but they were nowhere near the catastrophic levels. And here's the crazy thing. That 5 years was completely arbitrary. The individual who pulled that baseline data just chose to do 5 years. They could have done 6 years or 10 years or 15 years. That person chose 5 years just because they wanted to get a baseline data and then compared that to 2021 when the vaccine was out. And they said that 5 years, just specifically those 5 years were the corrupt years in the database. They fixed it. They fixed the whole database, brought it back up. They dispelled the whole thing. They said it was fake. This is fake news. We had an error in the database and no big deal. Don't worry about it. And they didn't even try to make it look like an accident. They just went in there and fixed it. They just played God mode, literally ruined all of that data that was supposed to be for commanders to understand understand and know the welfare of their troops, the health of their force, the readiness of their force, and they just ruined it. So we don't know what's going on with that data anymore. no commander can rely on DMED anymore as a authentic and relevant database, because it was just like that, just cut off and brought back online with completely different numbers. That to me is insane.
Well, it's not just within the DMED. I mean, we saw it in the financial numbers at a staggering level. The job numbers, that was my favorite, was paying attention to the job numbers the last few years. And after every 2 months of job numbers, it would drop by 100,000, 150,000. And they completely did those. The Fed, the way the Fed's books look, those numbers are being, I mean, it's almost as if now where the one place that the American public would at least have some reliability on, where that you could go in and you could be able to make a case back on these numbers that were the last bastion, right? That was the last man on the fence, if you will, before everything fell. And I think the representation, like you said, of somebody, giving that order, right? And even telling that E7 or E5 or whoever's sitting there punching them, hey, I want you to do this right now. Or if they did it themselves, that's taking place. And that's not just taking place on if it's taking place at the maximum place of responsibility, which is the health and wellness of our service members. And as a medic, man, if my guys and their med records weren't correct, not only was I screwing them over in getting promotions or screwing them over and going to the next command they wanted to go to, if they wanted to go to a tier 1 unit or whatever it was, but more so screwing them over in the long-term viability of disability payments or the level with which, their service is considered for retirement, the whole thing. And there's a motherfucker that hit that button and did that. And what I want to know, Sam, is what in your mind, how do we get to Pete Hegseth? How do we get to Pam Bondi? How do we get to whoever it is and say this cannot go on anymore? If somebody doesn't start to face retribution immediately, because they think Pete doing a bunch of push-ups with a bunch of dudes and Tulsi doing push-ups and doing the whole dog and pony thing, which I get and I appreciate. I love morale needed to come up. That's one way to do it. But the way you're going to bring back the confidence in us, the guys that fought in the GWAT, who they need for us to be able to tell our children or those kids on the block that say, hey, weren't you a SEAL? I want to be a SEAL. Do you think I should go in? Fuck no, you shouldn't go in. What do you think can happen? What needs to take place? Thank you so much for listening to this week's show with Sam Shoemate. Pardon the interruption, but we have to give credence where credence is due. If you're interested in spicing up your food, what you eat, your eggs, your steak, whatever it might be, then please consider Firecracker Farms, a family-owned business run by my good friend Alex, producing pepper-infused salt out of a really cool salt shaker. I'll tell you what, ever since I've gotten this product, it has completely enhanced all of my dining needs. So please visit firecracker.farm, type in RUT15, that's Romeo Uniform Tango 15 for your discount. Firecracker Farms. What do you think can happen? What needs to take place?
Well, we've been trying to cut in. When I say we, I'm talking about a very large number of people who have been making a concerted effort, some huge efforts over the last year specifically, but really with this administration to get this messaging in. And the, one of the people I like to bring attention to is Jordan Carr. She was Jordan. Okay.
Yeah.
She was,
I don't know her. I pay attention to everything she puts out.
For sure. Yeah. She has been just unrelenting with her messaging and has been on point. And the DoD from a lot of their verified accounts have reposted some of the stuff she's put out. She has been an absolute stellar statesman by bringing some of the anger, but then doing it in a professional way where it's going to have effect. And she's made enemies in our network of people, because some people think that it should just be, you know, just a body of, you know, corpses everywhere, and that we should just burn the whole system down. We're like, we're not going to get any change if we go after them with that kind of language. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
So she's been an incredible statesman for bringing some of that anger, but also the how-to. We have gotten this stuff in front of Hegseth. There is a task force that's being put together now to not only look at these individuals who put this stuff in place at the highest level. In fact, I believe honestly, the current numbers that we're seeing now of 20% attrition in the general officer positions, and then in Coast Guard, they just released they're going to cut 25% of those positions in flag officer billets. So with that, I think a lot of that is coming out from the work we've been doing, because I can't tell you a lot of that stuff on the back end, because a lot of groups, and we don't want to give stuff up. It's
absolutely.
But anyways, so with that, I know I got to be careful what I say. There is an individual working directly for, I'll just say, the Pentagon in a task force capacity that is actively looking at and providing the information on DMED, what was done. And right now they are looking at doing an audit going forward. I probably shouldn't even say that much, but they are going to audit the system and figure out what happened, who took it down, because there's a lot of crazy stuff with that.
Yeah.
The people that own the database, Unisant, basically we are not servicing that database ourselves. There's a lot of pretty reliable speculation that is going out to East Asia, not China, but specifically India. And we are, our troops' medical data is being housed and viewed by somebody outside of the Department of Defense, that we contracted that out. And that to me is even crazier that that's a thing.
Well, I mean, don't even get me started, man. All the way back when I was working for the agency, you know, and I began to understand interoperability with foreign governments and sharing of electronic intelligence, the whole thing. I just started going, wait, what? And then when I got out from there and I started to understand the contract industry at a higher level, and in particular, you know, data orientation, I started, you can't help but shake your head. All of this stuff is outsourced because our entire system is so antiquated and so archaic that, I mean, that's what, you know, that's why I think for me, one of the greatest things that could happen is to let that Doge team get in there, but really continue to expose. I mean, the whole thing that P came out with, like a month and a half ago or something, exposing the $5 billion going to consultants, 1.8 billion going to McKinsey and to Booz Allen and all this. No wonder these people are the most successful lobbyists in DC, because it's just a circle of financial influence back and forth. Oh, I'm going to support this to this congressman who will get the bill because I have the defense company. I'll use this admiral. I'll feed him the policy paper. He puts that in front of the congressman. Then he gets out. I put him on my board. And it's this self-licking ice cream, right? And no wonder why our data is being housed over in India right now. No wonder why our servers are so vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know,
and what you just described is something I talk about a lot, but that cyclical, that cycle is why we can't affect real change in the Pentagon without somebody just coming in and hacking it off, literally just purging the entire thing. And people say it's extreme. You can't just purge that kind of leadership. But what you just described is it. These people are putting on stars under the recommendation, under the approval of the Senate, Well, the people nominating them for those stars is the military industrial complex.
That's
so
right.
They go in and they say, this is our guy, put stars on him. Here's some lobbying money. They put stars on him. They approve the contracts for the defense industry. Defense industry keeps the cycle going. It just goes round and around and around. You don't break into those stars unless you're a made man and unless you're ready to play ball with them. Like, you keep the defense industry running. You protect the institution. Otherwise, bye. And they even protect it more than that. After 2 stars, that 3rd star is really where you're a made man. The 1 and
That's
2
right.
star is where they kind of figure you out. Are you going to play ball? But
Are
3
you
and 4
play
stars,
ball?
you're our guy.
That's right.
You're in there.
I don't know. Do you remember back? I think it was like somewhere, I forget. We were 10 years into the GWAT, but there was a big story that came out that it was like something like 500 junior officers from the soft community were pushed out on early retirement, right? And
Okay.
it was my whole thing was like, wait a minute, why would you push out these guys that just had 10 years of the most intense combat our nation's ever gone through since Vietnam? They have the experience. They know their guys. They know what it takes to win wars. Why would you get rid of them right now? And so, now we look at the numbers. There are more flag officers now than there were during World War II.
Right.
And listen, don't, again, there are most certainly some flag officers that have done right by their people. For sure. But the problem now, and I hope everybody understands this, right? When you hear 2 veterans, not complaining, but making strong arguments as to the complete and utter breakdown of leadership within the most significant military in the world, that has the most power, that has the greatest impact on foreign policy, world affairs. And you combine that with the atrocities of the lies that we've been pitched for the past 30 years and the engagements we're in and why we're in them. And you have to begin to realize why we're saying these things, because there needs to be something that takes place. You're right, Sam. I don't think we chopped the entire head off for sure. But I think
it's just not possible.
It's not possible. We can't conduct operations if we do that. So, do you believe this first 20%, will it be sweeping, or are they gonna, go along the line and because I think what the other side's freaked out about, or whoever the other side is, the pro-military industrial complex. I'm not even saying left or right, conservative, because that's not where Sam and I come from. And I'm telling you that right now. We come from what's going to benefit the person that's willing to save your life, 100%. Your country's life, right? So is that 20% is that a legal thing? Like, that's the only way you can bulk fire? Or do you think they're going and they're saying this guy, this woman, this guy?
Well, once again, I'll be careful. Now, I put a video out back in November. We were asked by somebody very high up in the Pentagon that was coming in to provide them with a list. This was actually asked of Pete Chambers, who I talked about earlier, Dr. Pete Chambers. This was a person who knew him personally, reached out to him, and he said, hey, I'm going to hand this off to Sam. He runs a social media page, Terminal CWO, and the guy said, yeah, I've heard of it. So he pushed it over to me. I reached out to some folks who are in the same circles I'm in now. We had an 06, like 3 05s, couple of 04s, legal counsel in there. I mean, it was a really well diversified group. Legal, a couple of 03s, and then an enlisted guy, and then we even had a E9 from the Coast Guard who provided us with names from Coast Guard, and that person put together their own list with a group that they had come together. Anyways, we submitted this list. It was very frustrating because nothing happened with it. We saw a couple names fall off the list, but relatively speaking, nothing was done. And it was frustrating because we'd put a lot of work into that, like good 72 hours, because we were given a very short suspense on getting that list in. And just recently, we were asked again to update the list. So we went in, we made some updates. We added, people who had retired already or possibly had been promoted. And we gave that list back to another individual who is well placed. And they said, we're trying. We're going to see what we can do. We know there's a lot of blowback from the Senate. There's a lot of pushback to protect a lot of these individuals. I know this specifically. Let me tell you a story really quick. So when we sent that first list up, there was a three-star Air Force general on that list. And Doc Pete Chambers, he gets a call from I always get the rank wrong. I'll just say Air Force E9. They have the longest title. Anyways, it's Air Force E9. He reached out to him and said he wanted to talk to him about, the list and some. We're like, that's weird. Like, how do you know about this? Well, we got to looking into it, and that was the senior enlisted advisor for that 3-star. So within 24 hours, that 3-star already knew about it. And then we found out that 3-star's wife actually worked on the Trump team. She was in some capacity, but she was part of Trump's team. So that list had made it to her in that amount of time. She tried to have her husband's E9 reach out and just wanted to do the political thing and talk about this. And why is his name on there? We didn't have that conversation with him, but that's how fast it moved. And that's how serious they took it. So I hope that Pete Hegseth's inability to get that purge done prior to this was simply due to politics and the kind of, the stress and the strain he's been under in his
war he's facing.
Absolute war.
Yeah.
But I know that there are people trying to do something about it. So all of that is a long answer. Sorry. But all of that to say that, no, they are not just cutting off the top, whatever. They are systematically looking at individuals who promoted DEI aggressively, not just went along with it, but aggressively promoted it, institutionalized it, made it a framework for the military, pushed very woke concepts to very, very aggressive racist concepts, making statements to the effect of, like, we need to promote more people of color and there's too many white people in the force. Very
pilots.
Yeah.
The white pilots thing was just,
right.
It's asinine. It's unbelievable.
That, and then to a lesser degree, the COVID stuff. And that was made clear to us that they were more focused on the DEI and the wokeness and all that than they were the COVID. However, those kind of things kind of bled in hand to a certain degree. So there is a very extensive list that we gave them with more than what they asked, but who we have receipts on, and we'll see if they use it. We'll see if they do anything.
Pardon the interruption, but once again, we just want to inform you about the live motivational speaking event that I'm going to be giving on May 31st at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on our Patreon account. That's at David Rutherford Show on Patreon. It's a $2 subscription per month fee. You'll gain access to all different types of different additional content, course selection, as well as these motivational events that I'm going to be doing regularly. So please check us out. May 31st, live motivational event with me. Booyah. Well, first, I just got to say thank you for putting that together with your team and the people that care. And, for me, I think one of the great challenges is, the American public continues to see, whether it's Epstein or it's this stuff, they see this, or they feel a general malaise, right? That there's nothing going to happen, nothing going to, it's funny. I'll show my wife, can you believe this? And she goes, stop showing me that crap until something happens. I'm sick of it. And so that cognitive dissonance is so entrenched in human beings in this country because I think they feel like it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter. And what I want them to know is that it does matter. There is a war taking place behind the scenes by Sam, by his team, by everybody out there that are in all these different places. There are people that are now, bonded over these atrocities and are bringing the heat. So
there are people doing stuff all over the place, and the problem is we think that if it's not published on social media, then it doesn't exist, and that's hard because you have to walk that fine line of operational security, but also we want to show people that there's something to hope for. And it's not just in this fight, it's everywhere. One of the big things that just came out was Sean Ryan's show the other day with Tim Tebow. And that was startling for so many people. But this is something that I've worked in for years now. I've worked in counter human trafficking. I've worked in these alliances and these networks. I'm very familiar with what's going on. And I can tell you there are a lot of people doing work, but the work is expensive. There's a lot of pushback. It's very dangerous. It involves oftentimes going up against hardened organizations like cartels and it's
mafias from around the world.
It's very difficult, very, very expensive, like I said, and you can't publicize that stuff. You just can't. You can't talk about the work you're doing because there's people that are out there doing stuff that I'll just tell you is, what do they say in special operations? We operate in the gray area. I'll just leave it at that are operating in the gray area. And how do you tell people the stuff like that? You can't. So it just has to happen. And these people have to go alone and try to establish these alliances outside of the legal framework, I'll just say.
I love that you brought up the cost of it, because that's what I think people don't understand is the magnitude of costs. I was talking to my friend Jared Hudson recently, and I was like, how's funding going? Because he had run for sheriff down in Alabama, and then that funding shifted towards his trafficking organization. And he's like, it's been good, but it's hard because I'm so busy doing this other stuff. So, what I always say to people who want to give, because there's as many people that want to give to the aid organizations that facilitate the overtaking of America, right? There's as many Americans that are willing to give money to these organizations. And so what I always try and say, advocate for, you want to give money, you want to help people, find a trafficking organization that's doing good work, that you can get somebody actually who's involved on the phone. They will describe what they're doing and send money to them, because that, I believe, is the greatest battle that we face in the world, for sure.
I mean, literally, just to put it in perspective, based on, to piggyback on what you just said, was a lot of these operations can cost into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on where you're going. Even stuff within the continent of the United States is going to cost, based on a small team doing whatever type of operation, could cost anywhere to $50,000 to $100,000. And if you're talking about an international operation, the amount of people you have to pay off and the kind of...
Can you break that down, Sam? Can you break some of those costs down so people understand? Because I think what happens when people throw out these giant numbers, they're like, 100,000 for what, man? What are you talking about?
Yeah, you have to, first of all, let's just talk about the logistics. You're going to talk about airplanes, talking about equipment, food, lodging, and a lot of these folks are very resourceful. They'll sleep on the ground if they have to, but in some of these cases, it's not ideal to do stuff like that. So all of the logistical expenses in that alone, but the real cost comes in when you start talking about developing networks and alliances. And when you're going into non-permissible environments, you're going to have to build out those friendships with people who really don't care what you're involved in. They just, are you going to pay me or not? They want the money. So
that's right.
You're going to have to pay somebody off to do that. And that, we obviously know this very well. If anybody who's worked in special operations, you know what that looks like. But for folks who don't, it's the same type of work. You have to pay these people and build these things. And then you have to build out those eyes and ears on the grounds. You have to build out your sources. These people all want money. None of this is done for free. They are not doing this out of the kindness of their heart. All of this stuff involves money. Now, the operators who are doing the work, they're not making anything. Okay. They are doing this out of the kindness of their heart. They're not getting rich off this, and they're putting their lives on the line to do this, but they have to give so much money to all these different places. And then, And then you have to talk about stuff like, and I'll be very careful with this, but a lot of the stuff involves wet work where you're talking about guys who go in and you have extraction teams to get this stuff out. But then you have guys that you have to pay that are off the books, that are not part of your organization, that don't exist, that are working in alias because they're going to go in there and they're going to kill people. They're going to go murder what's in there, and nothing can ever get back to them. They have to be completely disconnected from everything and anyone. And that involves the costs of all this stuff is so incredibly expensive. And the type of knowledge that goes into this work is so extensive that, people don't think about all these little things. And then you have your analysts and all these folks who are digging into this stuff on the backside, and they're looking into judges, and they're looking into CPS and foster care and local law enforcement, and seeing which sheriff is dirty and who's allowing this, and putting together these target packets of who is facilitating this movement up and down the border, and who's doing what and everything else. It is a lot of work. People have families to feed. They have it's I
massive.
could go on and on, but it's
massive. Thank you for describing it in that context. I really, that's the problem. And I think that's the problem. That's all of these things, right? People know that there are these travesties of justice taking place at a magnitude never before, right? I think really the exposure of COVID, the pulling back of the curtain, for one, psychologically, that's challenging for many, many people, right? People just don't want to acknowledge the way the world works, right?
Right.
They might know it or have heard some things. They've read a book, seen a movie, whatever the hell, know a guy, right? Oh, I had a buddy who was this. And
yeah.
But to actually dig in and allow yourself intellectually to decipher what all this means, it's overwhelming for people. And so, that I think is a very difficult thing to penetrate through, but that's what's taking place.
Yeah.
And I think now that's why I'm such a massive fan of yours and what you're doing. And I know fan's the wrong word. Admiration is probably a better, but it's really just, it's this, your stuff pulls me in. It pulls me in, as it hopefully does other people emotionally, right? You hear these stories and your soul's laid forth on this, this table of like astonishment that this is how we're treating our veterans.
Yeah.
This is how children are being treated around the world. Well, thank God there are people that still want to Roger up, raise their right hand, and defend the nation or defend the ideal of what the Republic represents. But more importantly, there are people like us who said, well, I don't want to go do it over there anymore. I want to go do it over here.
Yes.
So that's what's taking place as well, too. So
absolutely.
Sam, again, man, thank you so much for what you're doing. I just, now I do know that you're starting a new site. You've got a podcast. Can you describe that a little bit so we can get some exposure and really start driving people towards what you're doing?
Well, this was really hard for me because I was working in this space with Dr. Pete Chambers, and I still am. But after going on the Sean Ryan show, it really blew some stuff up in my world, and I had some big recommendations from people who knew me. Anyways, the organization that I am officially working for right now as the chief operating officer is two organizations. It's Our Country, Our Choice, where I'm running a new podcast and doing a thing, and it's a movement. But to talk less about that, focusing on republic.us, and we have a big relaunch that's happening next month. We're going to be coming out with an app and a bunch of really cool features. But basically, the purpose of this is to mobilize and push citizens in their community to report on local news. And it's important that people understand the same media outlets at the national level that are controlled by big money are controlling local media outlets with the same big money. And I promise you can look into this. And if you've noticed a lack of solid reporting in your community, there's a reason for that, because they are bound by the same restrictions on their editorial staff that the guys at the big level are. So we want to mobilize people to go start shining a light in their community. Just go start writing stories. Go be that citizen journalist. So that's what this platform is for. And you can write about anything. You can write about corruption in politics. You can write about sports.
Your
you can
school
write about
system.
School system, yeah. We're going to have a local TikTok feed on there, so you can just post a video of a car wreck or a local barbecue or whatever you want to do. But the whole point is we want to start focusing on local. It's going to be ad-free. And for people that do post, it's going to cost a subscription, because it's the only way we can maintain our servers. It's completely ad-free. My boss, though he has money, he is not able to bankroll this entire thing in this effort we're doing. So
you don't want to do it that way, though. Like you want the people to have skin in the game, man.
Yes. We want people to have skin in the game, and we want them to understand that you can make a huge difference in your community. And these articles can be shared out on social media. But the cool thing is, we're launching here in Orlando, where I'm at right now. If I pop up my feed, and we're getting more contributors on, and in the next month we're doing a huge push, but I pop up my feed, I look at the local algorithm, and that's all it is. It's local news. I'm not talking about Trump. I'm not talking about Fauci.
Nope.
I'm not talking about any of this stuff. It's all local news, what's going on. And that's what I want. I want to know what's going on in my community, because that's where I can make change and affect things. So that's what we're doing.
Amen. And will you give that site again one more time?
Republic.us.
Republic.us.
Yeah.
Sam, thank you so much, man. God bless you. Stay safe and keep doing what you're doing,
Thanks,
brother.
David. I appreciate it.